Okay, so thanks for joining this webinar about compliance and enforcement activities for the BC Oil and Gas Commission. My name is Dax Burke. I'm an Operations Supervisor, Compliance and Enforcement in Fort St. John. I've been with the Commission for the last 5 years now, and I'll be going through this webinar with you. So a bit of housekeeping to start. Please mute all of your microphones. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation, and please type your questions into the comments box below. Those questions not addressed at the end of this at the end of the webinar will be followed up directly, or follow-up questions can be sent to stakeholder@bcogc.ca. A link to the presentation will also be emailed to those registered and posted on the Commission's website. So what we'll be going over for the next hour or so is the Commission's compliance management system, our annual compliance plan, a bit of a background on compliance and enforcement, inspection planning, conducting an inspection and associated inspection deficiencies, investigations and enforcement actions, complaint and incident reporting and response, and then we'll have our wrap up and some questions. So who is responsible for what? Companies prepare applications for everything from investigative use, wells, facilities, pipelines, and other associated oil and gas activities. The BC Oil and Gas Commission is the provincial full life cycle regulator of oil and gas activities from application, development, production, abandonment, and reclamation. Major projects often require environmental assessments by the British Columbia Environmental Assessment Office and/or the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency. And the National Energy Board oversees pipelines that cross provincial boundaries and has granted export approval to several facilities. Once liquefied natural gas is loaded onto ships, regulatory authority is under Transport Canada. And reviewable projects regulations set what qualifies as a reviewable project for BC-based projects. So a little bit about compliance and enforcement. We have 25 staff positions in 4 different offices. Our office with C&E staff include Fort St. John, Dawson Creek, Fort Nelson, and Terrace. With the other offices looking at Prince George, Kelowna, and Victoria, home to our other departments such as First Nations, engineering, and senior leadership. I'd like to note as well, Dawson Creek's office also covers the interior of the province, with the Terrace office also covering the Lower Mainland. The Commission's compliance management system. So the Commission functions under an overarching compliance management system that assigns compliance responsibilities to all those who are responsible for ensuring compliance to various sections of the Act and/or regulations. The compliance management system is the integrated framework of people, policies, processes, information, and tools used to ensure conformity with regulatory requirements. Hi there. So for new people just joining us, could you just please mute your microphones? Thank you. So out of the compliance management system, the annual compliance plan is developed, which sets out the Commission's compliance verification activity priorities and targets for the fiscal year. It enhances the tracking and resources and results, and it creates a record of compliance planning efforts, which establishes, as well as establishing a planning process that can be improved upon. The annual compliance plan is a cyclical corporate planning process which follows the fiscal planning cycle. It is approved by the Compliance Steering Committee and is administered by Compliance and Enforcement. It's supported by all Commission departments tasked with compliance oversight responsibilities. And it's a plan that sets the Commission's compliance verification activity priorities and targets for the fiscal year. So to wrap it all up, the compliance plan is developed to provide a documented plan that is based off of foundational knowledge and can consistently be improved upon. So the photo we're looking at now is just our process flow chart of the annual compliance plan. And as you can see, it's built as a cyclical system, which allows for continuous improvement. So the annual compliance plan's final product outlines the targets for the 3 primary compliance verification avenues, which are field inspections, external audits, and operational submission requirements. So as stated earlier, the annual compliance plan is administered by the Commission's Compliance and Enforcement Branch. With that, the main compliance function that C&E is involved in is in inspections. However, C&E does cross into operational submissions realm and supports the audit process where necessary. For example, in the field verification process. The compliance enforcement manages the compliance through assessing field compliance through inspections, investigating alleged non-compliances, administrating our enforcement processes, as well as responding in the field to response or incidents and complaints. So this process flow diagram shows a high-level overview of what the Commission's compliance and enforcement group's day-to-day looks like. In this diagram, we will begin by focusing on inspections, which starts in the planning phase. With direction from the annual compliance plan, compliance and enforcement develops its inspection plan. The primary means of selecting locations to conduct inspections is through an assessment scoring model. The model informs decisions about inspection coverage and focuses inspection resources where they're most needed. Inspections may also be done based on industry operational events, such as construction starts, commission analysis or audits, follow-up inspections, and other items. Factors included in the model include assets in proximity to parks and protected areas, Oil and Gas Activity Act wildlife habitat areas and ungulate winter ranges, residential areas and schools, agricultural land reserves, and streams and rivers. It also takes into consideration permit holders' existing behavioral aspects, including prior inspection history, remedial compliance rates, initial compliance rates, the issuance of high-risk deficiencies, and prior incidents. As well, taken into consideration is individual well and facility information, including well depth, hydrogen sulfide content, the age of the activity, and the frequency of inspections completed on the site. Inspection planning also takes into consideration activity type and an activity's regulatory lifecycle phase, as well as the focus area in which that activity impacts. This allows the plan to be modified to take into consideration items such as other departmental inspection requirements, seasonality access issues, as well as external risk factors. The planning cycle is done biannually, producing 2 inspection lists for staff, summer and winter. Summer inspections focus on pipeline post-construction, roads, geophysical activities, inactive and decommissioned wells and facilities, water and agricultural land inspections, with winter inspections focusing on active wells and facilities, construction activities, and winter road inspections. The list developed for inspection staff is the driver for field inspections and constitutes the majority of our inspections. However, inspection staff have the ability to conduct inspections on other oil and gas activities while in the field on the basis of local knowledge, route access, prior inspection history, incidents and complaints, and other items. So as a result of inspection planning, 65% of annual inspections conducted are planned through the risk analysis approach. The remainder 34% of the inspections are at the discretion of staff, with the remainder 1% of inspections being triggered from events such as incidents and complaints. So now we'll move into the actual conduct of an inspection. Annually, compliance and enforcement staff at the Commission conduct, on average, around 4,500 inspections of various oil and gas activities per year. Inspections of oil and gas activities are done to ensure that regulatory requirements and/or permit conditions are met. Inspections are conducted on all permitted oil and gas activities at all regulatory life cycle phases. And as you can see in the diagram above, shown, in the orange boxes are some of the things we inspect against. So in the diagram shown, you can see H2S detection, emergency shutdown valves, and power systems which power the H2S detection. An inspection doesn't just constitute looking at a wellhead. It encompasses all oil and gas activities, which include geophysical, roads, wells, pipelines, facilities, LNG facilities, and other related activities such as short-term water use, changes in and about a stream, decking sites, and the list goes on. Activities are further broken down into specific items that are required to be inspected. As well, depending on which stage of the regulatory life cycle phase the activity is in, will also dictate what gets inspected. With the variety of oil and gas activities in the province, individual inspections are subject to change in relation to what activities are encountered. With that, we'll go through a common inspection that staff conduct. So an inspection starts at the beginning of an access road. In this case, the access road starts at the bottom of the purple line on the screen. The road running surface, ditch lines, and any associated culverts or bridges are inspected to ensure that the road is being maintained to the oil and gas road regulation, and that the road is not causing any negative impact to the environment or creating a hazardous environment for the public. Any associated pipeline right-of-ways that are able to be inspected are included. Pipeline right-of-ways are inspected for water and erosion management along the right-of-way, as well as appropriate identification signs where applicable, and any other hazards or environmental risks. Associated oil and gas activities in relation to the permitted well and/or facility are also included in an inspection. In this case, associated activities include decking sites, remote sump pits, and borrow pits. And finally, inspected is the lease pad, all of its associated wells and facilities, and any other oil and gas infrastructure is inspected to ensure compliance is met with the Act and regulations and any relevant permit conditions. An inspection is then entered into our database, and an inspection letter is sent to the company with the results. In 2014, the Commission started the Natural Resource Aboriginal Liaison Program, or ALP for short, to build relationships between Doig River First Nation and the Commission. Since 2014, the ALP has grown to 9 ALP agreements with 13 liaisons and has evolved into a cross-government initiative that develops relationships between agencies and Indigenous nations through capacity building and participation in compliance and stewardship monitoring and emergency management within the nation's traditional territories. The Commission's C&E department works closely with their Aboriginal Liaison program to provide participating communities opportunity to be involved in compliance monitoring. The liaisons work extensively with C&E staff to do inspections, bring forth community concerns, and provide input into how concerns are resolved. Liaisons are provided technical training and are mentored by C&E staff to develop detailed understanding of how to inspect oil and gas activities. Liaisons have become a trusted conduit for transferring knowledge between communities and Commission staff. They are able to bring that knowledge, along with information they gain from their field work, back to their community. Ongoing benefits include capacity building, better information sharing, and better knowledge about resource development impacts to inform future decisions. Interaction with liaisons has also been a positive experience for Commission staff, as it has helped staff to better understand First Nations perspectives and values. The Commission's C&E staff are committed to the participation in the ALP and fully support liaisons' involvement in monitoring of oil and gas activities. Participation in the ALP and the resulting improved relationships, communications, and transparency is one element of the Commission's work towards implementing the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP, and BC's Draft 10 Principles to Guide Relationships with Indigenous Peoples. So moving on from inspections, when something is found to be in non-compliance in an inspection, we follow our deficiency notice and correction process. Again, when items are found to be in non-compliance with the regulation, such as the photo above shows, in the inspection process, an inspection is entered, and which includes the deficiency and the associated legislation with the deficiency. So the completion of the inspection, when the deficiency is entered, a letter is sent to the company which outlines the deficiency, where the deficiency was found, and provides timelines on when the permit holder needs to fix the deficiency. Timeline lengths start at 24 hours, 14 days, and 30 days to rectify the deficiency and respond back in our database. In cases, an extension to the deficiency can be requested. If a permit holder cannot achieve compliance within the required correction timeline, they may request an extension. Extension requests must include a rationale, outline any complicitating factors necessitating the extension. For example, seasonal access restrictions, availability of labor and equipment, and others. Extension determinations are based on risk to public safety and the environment, the permit holder's correction plan and deficiency history, the Commission's policies and procedures, and out of that, extensions may be granted, denied, or modified. When a permit holder fails to correct or adequately correct a deficiency prior to the required correction date, a second deficiency letter may be issued to the permit holder. C&E staff will also follow up with the company to ensure they are aware of the deficiency. If the nature of the non-compliant warrants, the deficiency will be escalated to the Commission's Enforcement Division. So from that, we'll move into our investigation section. So back into it, compliance and enforcement investigations. Investigations are initiated when C&E discovers or is advised of circumstances where legal requirements have not been adhered to. There are many avenues by which this is possible and can include permit holder self-disclosures, issuance of an order, incidents, complaints, referrals from other divisions or groups within the Commission, reports of unauthorized third-party activity in the vicinity of a pipeline, referrals from outside agencies, inspection findings, and audits and results. The listing just stated may not include all potential sources of an investigation, and any circumstance where an oil and gas activity has a negative impact on public safety and/or the environment may be investigated. So an investigation may lead to an enforcement action depending on the non-compliance. The Commission has various tools to bring a permit holder into compliance as shown on the screen. Through the investigation, it may be determined that an enforcement action is required. Enforcement actions encompass an array of tools and actions that work to keep activities and operations in compliance with legislation. This includes, but is not limited to, the issuance of orders, findings of contravention, and issuance of administrative penalties. Enforcement actions. Warning letters. Warning letters are used when a non-compliance is small in nature and poses minimal or no threat to the public safety and/or in the environment, but an enforcement action is required. It builds a compliance history of the issue with the permit holder, which can be referenced in future cases of similar non-compliances. Compliance meetings. There are two types of compliance meetings, introductory and specific compliance issues. An introductory compliance meeting is not necessarily an enforcement action, but is conducted when a new oil and gas company establishes itself in the province. The meeting establishes the baseline compliance requirements, and company representatives are provided information on key company commission processes, requirements, and sources of more detailed information. Specific compliance issues are meetings are conducted when a permit holder shows a consistent pattern of non-compliance behavior, and the Commission can hold the compliance meeting for that specific behavior. In the meeting, Commission representatives outline the expectations and regulatory requirements concerning the specific element of oil and gas operations where there have been non-compliances. The outcomes of the meeting involve measurable commitments by the company and action items for improvement. A compliance meeting does not impede the Commission from exercising other concurrent enforcement actions. Tickets. Designated Commission staff have the ability to issue tickets for specified enactments under OGA, including the Water Sustainability Act and the Environmental Management Act. An example of a ticket issuance is when a company is given authorization to withdraw water and they are required to report the amount of withdrawn from the specific location. That includes if no water is withdrawn. Failure to do so results in a ticket under the Water Sustainability Act for failure to report water use withdrawal volumes within the required time. Orders. The Commission can issue orders with respect to activities and obligations under the Act. Orders are not contingent on finding of contravention and may also be issued if a person fails to comply with the Act, the regulations, or the person's permit or authorizations, or a previous order. Orders may also be necessary to mitigate a risk to public safety, protection the environment, or to promote the conservation of petroleum and natural gas resources. Orders specify whatever action must be taken, stopped, or modified by the permit holder and includes the date by which they must comply. Contravention reports and decisions. The Commission may pursue further enforcement actions through a contravention and decision if the permit holder does not comply with order requirements by the date specified. It is important to note that the issuance of an order does not preclude the Commission from pursuing a contravention for any non-compliance. For a contravention decision, a Commission investigator develops a contravention report containing detailed evidence outlining the permit holder's alleged contravention. The report is provided to a Commission delegated decision maker, and the permit holder is given written notice of opportunity to be heard in order to present the Commission with evidence supporting their defense. The determination will indicate whether the permit holder is found in contravention of the Act, regulations, permit conditions, authorizations, or orders, and whether an administrative penalty will be imposed. When a determination is made, the permit holder is given written notification of the finding and administrative penalty, if any. The determination provides detailed information regarding the contravention, the penalty, and the applicable timelines, as well as information on the right to request a review or an appeal. The Commission also has the ability to pursue prosecutions for specified enactments under OGA, including the Water Sustainability Act, Environmental Management Act, and Heritage Conservation Act. The Commission is committed to publishing its enforcement orders, order terminations, contravention decisions, and review decisions in a timely and transparent manner. Information on enforcement actions can be found on the Commission's website, bcogc.ca, under the Industry Zone tab, and then the Compliance and Enforcement. Note, this picture shown is a cross-section of what is reported and are not the last items issued. And the layout of the enforcement actions is going to be changing as part of our transparency policy, which will provide additional information on enforcement actions. And finally, complaints and incidents. So the Commission has emergency officers on call 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And if the public has any inquiries or concerns, they can call 250-794-5200. After a complaint has been categorized with the emergency officer, after a complaint has been categorized, the emergency officer can dispatch a C&E officer and may contact the applicable company to request a representative visit the site of the complaint and follow up with the Commission. As well, once a complaint has been received, the emergency officer will ensure that it is within the Commission's jurisdiction before categorizing the complaint as either routine or urgent. After a complaint has been categorized, the emergency officer can dispatch C&E officer, which may contact, again, the applicable company to request a representative visit the site, and anything found outside of the Commission's jurisdiction will be forwarded to the appropriate agency. So once dispatched, compliance and enforcement officers can contact the complainant for more information, conduct an inspection of an oil and gas activity if applicable, issue deficiencies if found, work with other Commission departments to find a solution to the problem, for example, engineering, escalate the complaint to enforcement if applicable, and actively monitor an activity to find the issue reported or to ensure that it is not ongoing. The list of what compliance and enforcement officers can do is not exhaustive, with complaints covering a vast array of issues. And unfortunately, not all complaints can be satisfied for various reasons. For example, not being able to discover the source of a complaint, or a complaint was a single event-based event. All complaints received are logged, and all information around attempts to satisfy are kept with the complaint for future reference. Incidents. During an oil and gas activity, an unanticipated incident may occur that is outside normal operations. Emergency response begins when an incident is imminent or immediately after the event occurs. Response includes the activities that address the short-term, direct effects of an incident. Response also includes the execution of emergency plans and operational activities designed to protect persons, property, and the environment. Permit holders are the primary responders when emergencies or incidents occur and must implement their emergency response plans immediately. The permit holder must inform the Commission of the incident via Emergency Management BC or online. The Commission will provide oversight and monitor events during incidents and emergency response. An incident becomes an emergency if the incident requires actions by the permit holder to protect persons, property, or the environment. Once the Commission receives a report of an incident, the emergency officer will determine whether or not the incident is in the Commission's jurisdiction, whether the incident requires handoff to the Emergency Operations Center Director, and whether or not field personnel need to be dispatched and will act accordingly. An unanticipated, incident reporting. So incident reporting covers around any release of a substance in amounts exceeding the thresholds defined in the spill reporting regulation, as well as any release of a substance into a lake, stream, river, or ocean in any volume. It also includes any release of sour product where measurement of 10 parts per million or greater is found, 1 meter or greater from the source. Incident reporting is also required for any failure of an emergency or safety-related system, damage to equipment with or without release, or any vandalism or security incident causing damage or interfering with the process control. As well incidents, including seismic events, loss of circulation, and other events can constitute an incident to be reported. So to note, compliance and enforcement officers are not dispatched to all incidents. For incidents that C&E officers are dispatched to, basic information is gathered and it is ensured that the company is actively managing the incident. Incident reporting, or incident classification, sorry. Minor incidents are smaller scale incidents which are confined to a lease, site, or a right-of-way and are very unlikely to escalate. There's no health impact to people or the environment, and there's no significant impact on operations. Level 1 emergencies have the potential to or have actual off-lease impact with a very small possibility for escalation. There are some minor impacts on operations, and control of the incident is established or established is imminent. The emergency response plan is also activated. Level 2 emergencies are more significant incidents with the off-lease impacts and the possibility of escalation. Control of the incident may or not have been established, but is expected to be in the short term, and the emergency response plan has been activated. And level 3 emergencies are the most significant, with large-scale impacts on and off lease and have major equipment damage and or failure with potential of life and safety impacts. Control and or containment is not likely in the short term, and the emergency response plan has been activated. Incident dispatch. So once dispatched, compliance and enforcement officers ensure the permit holder is adequately responding to the incident, document what happened and what the permit holder is doing to stop the incident and any reclamation activities, report back to the Emergency Operations Center if necessary, monitor the surrounding area of the incident for any adverse impact, as well as gather any information to support an investigation, and they also can follow up on post-incident through reclamation to normal operation phases, ensuring activities have been completed. So this has been a broad overview of compliance and enforcement. For any more information, you can visit our compliance and enforcement section of the website, where we have our manuals and our posted compliance and enforcement information. So thank you for joining the webinar. We'll take about a 3-minute pause and then we'll answer some questions. Presentation, we will be posting it on the BCOGC website externally, and if you join this webinar, it'll be sent to you directly. Another question for inspection letters being sent to local landowners or First Nations when deficiencies are found. At this time, the letters are not sent to the local landowner or the First Nations. It is only sent to the company, as that is how our internal database is built and how the inspection communication process works. And for the question about incident reporting being publicly available and searchable, at the top of my head, I don't know if it is, but it's a question we'll look into and get back to you with an answer. For the question around dams being scheduled for internal inspections, they are taken into consideration during the inspection planning phases. And if there is a requirement for them to be inspected, they are inserted in those plans and the inspections are conducted. To the question around the annual compliance plan, what is the scope or level of Aboriginal collaboration or involvement? I don't know personally, but again, it's a question we can look into and provide an answer for. The question around if somebody notices something wrong on an activity across the road from them, but is not on their land, what do they do and who do they call? Again, they can call the number provided at the beginning of the presentation, 250-794-5200, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you will get a response from an emergency officer who then will classify the issue and will look at our response mechanisms. For the question around compliance and enforcement works for cultural heritage and environmental resources as they relate to First Nations, our involvement is brought in once there's been a non-compliance discovered. So in the beginning, front end of the process, in application phases, there has to be taken into consideration impact to archaeological sites. And again, compliance and enforcement gets involved when there is a non-compliance found. And a question about if a landowner calls in a concern, will they be let known about the results of the inspection afterwards if they are the landowner? That arrangement can be made where the inspection staff will contact the landowner back and relay what they have found on the site and what kind of management actions they'll be taking or can take forward. The 10 ppm comment is 10 parts per million, so parts per million of the product in the atmosphere. Well, thank you very much for sitting in on this webinar. If you have any more questions, feel free to email in to the stakeholder email provided at the beginning of the webinar, and we will get back to you on those questions.